All right. So yeah, the topic that we have taken today, and it's an important topic as well because it is where everything starts with respect to agile project management, is managing backlog in Jira. Atlassian Jira briefly is a tool provided by Atlassian, obviously, and it's an Australian company. It's been there for a very long time. It started as an issue tracker, and now it can be used for agile project management. We are going to talk about how the backlog can be managed in Jira. A little about me. Who am I? I'm Sharad Julka. I have about 19 years plus experience in total. Uh, Almost 9 to 10 years I've been using, I think more than 10 years now, I've been using Jira. Uh, and I've seen it evolving, graduating from what it was to what it is now. A really good tool, continuously evolving. So the people behind Jira, they'll hear a lot. I have played a system administrator role in multiple organizations. Some of those organizations you can see. I am also a lean agile consultant, and these are some of the certifications that you can see on the screen. Right, that's what I am. The seminar, the webinar summary today. What we are going to do, and I've highlighted a few of the words there, which make a lot of meaning. In this webinar, we would see how Scrum teams can create, prioritize, manage their product and sprint backlog. Because Jira offers a very straightforward and a very effective approach to managing either for one team or for multiple teams the product backlog. It does not manage by itself. Somebody has to sit and do that job. But the way it can be done is through issues, because everything in Jira is issues. But it doesn't start with the issues only. And how it happens, that is what I'm going to tell you. Now, what we're going to cover in terms of topics, uh, very brief slide on what is backlog management. I assume most of us, or maybe all of us, know, but just for the sake of everybody on the same page, uh, I am going to share what backlog management is, and you can always raise your point. And might I raise a request that if you are not speaking, if you could put yourself on mute. It's a little bit of background noise I can hear. Thank you. All right. So what does Jira offer in terms of backlog management? It has a lot of features. Probably, I would say 80% of the features are not even used. So it has definitely a lot to offer. But in terms of backlog management, what Jira offers, and let's see on Jira or in Jira, can we actually do that? All right. Then we will see in terms of what are the most common features. What is a default requirement hierarchy? Now, this is an important topic because I've seen personally the requirement hierarchy changing in Jira over the years. Then what is the requirement mapping? Then we'll see the actual Jira tool and see what are these things which are available. This is not a training, so definitely I will not go through each and everything, but I will show you where things are possible. And then some tips I'll give you for optimum backlog management. During the course of this webinar, you are most welcome to ask questions. If there are more number of questions on same topic, I'd like to move forward and attend to that question a little later. So I have a notepad here. I'll take the questions down. You can also type in your questions so that I can go through those questions. Just in case, because of time constraint and we are tight on time today, and we are not able to cover any questions, we'll make sure that the questions which we have, the list of those questions, we respond to you. I don't know how we can do that. We'll work it out. So me and Jamna and the team there, we can just see how we can do that so that your questions are attended to. And then obviously you have the contact details, mail ID and all. You can always write to Stalwart and we can respond back to you. All right, that's what it is. So let's start backlog management. So what is backlog management in general? Backlog management is related to Agile. It's been there for long. It's all about a practice. It starts with the product owner because the concept of backlog management comes from Scrum as a model. The product owner is the one who adds, creates, modifies, prioritizes, grooms, update the backlog. So definitely backlog has to have something. The backlog contains backlog items, BIs, or product backlog items, PBIs is what we call them. These are high-level items, which are very high-level requirements, and then split into smaller requirements, which can be done in smaller time frames. So these are epics, features, stories. We don't take tasks as backlog items because those are activities which need to be performed to accomplish the stories. Now, different organizations, different models have been there, and different organizations use those models. They sometimes have epics feature stories. Some of the models which are not Scrum based, they have solution also in between, epic feature solution or epic solution feature and story. So Jira offers only epic stories and tasks. That is what Jira offers, and I'll show you that as well. Anytime the backlog has to have a detailed description of what it contains, it should be estimated. That means each and every item needs to be estimated. Emergent means it keeps on evolving. New item keeps on, they keep on coming. And continuously the backlog is prioritized. There is no fixed time in a day or a fixed time in a week or a fixed time in a month that somebody called a product owner would open the backlog and do all these operations. All these operations are done continuously throughout the week, throughout the month. So in terms of default hierarchy, I'll just jump over a slide and go to the next, and then I'll come back to that slide. The requirement hierarchy offered in Jira is epics, stories, and subtasks. So there are epics, which are high level requirements. Mostly the meaning of having an epic in Jira is that you feel that this is a very large requirement. It would be done over a period of releases, multiple releases, months. There is a concept of sprint, and I assume now that you are aware of what sprint is. If you're not, sprint is a time box. It's a time box where the development activity is done. It comes from Scrum model. So it normally is 2 weeks. It can be 3 or 4 as well. But 2 weeks time is a sprint, and within that time frame, the requirement that needs to be accomplished is called a story. So an epic can be split into multiple stories. So for example, epic can be split into 10 stories or 20 stories. That's the hierarchy from epic to story. Now, what is a subtask? A subtask is just a step: development, code review, testing, unit testing, just a review. These are activities that need to be performed to be able to accomplish a story, to be able to do a story. These activities relate to the definition of done. And I'm sure have heard of definition of done. If not, the definition of done is a checklist. What needs to be done? So it goes vice versa. What are those activities that need to be done to be able to finish the story, to be able to mark the story as DONE, done. So this is what is offered by Jira. Apart from this, there is one more requirement hierarchy, but it doesn't appear in the hierarchy as such. It's called task, just the task. In fact, there are two more, to be very frank. One is task, and task is any activity which may not be related to a story, but definitely is related to an epic. It could be just an activity which may not be related to an activity, to an epic or a story. It needs to be done by the team to accomplish something. I would always recommend that you create a task, you create a story, link it to some epic, so that everything is accounted for. That's how the product owner works. That's how the team should work. Then and then there's one more. One more requirement part, or I would now open that box. It's called issue type. Now, when we come to Jira, everything is an issue type. So that is called bug, but that is not in the normal. We don't create our stories to create bugs. Bugs come when we the testing happens, and those are related. So I'm not included task and subtask, task and bug in this list, because it doesn't follow the requirement hierarchy. It follows a separate hierarchy. All right, I'll come back. So this is what normally is followed in Jira. Very, very briefly, before I even attend to this slide, everything in Jira is a project, and this is for those people who have never opened Jira, never worked on Jira. Everything in Jira is in a project. So you open Jira, the first thing you will create is a project. Project is a workspace. You have to have your items, your backlog items, stories, tasks, epics within a project. And now I can switch over to the actual Jira. So for example, the Jira instance that you see here, and if you're not able to, you can raise your hand, you can let know, you can speak. So this is the Jira instance that is a cloud version of Jira that I have in front of you. It has everything is inside the project. So I click on Jira software, there's an icon on the left. I can see everything, either as a dashboard, as a project, people, issues, filters. Tempo is a small plugin. I'm not going to use that. And settings. So it has to be within this. So if you want to create something, it has to be inside a project. And there are a few projects that you can see on the screen. And some of these projects, I mean, I think the one that I'm going to use today is high altitude e-commerce website. It's a very dummy project. Uh, I've been using it for some time. So what I do is I create, delete. It's a fresh today created for this particular webinar. I have here 3 stories, interestingly. So, and there is a sprint. Now, the moment I open, so you've seen this, the moment I've opened the Jira project, instead of taking me to anything, it has taken me to sprint 1. And I don't want to do that. When I open, that's a default screen, by the way. I want to go to the backlog because that's what we are talking about. Now, in the backlog, on the screen, you'll see there are about 5 stories. Now, anything has to be inside the project. So we are inside a project. Now, what is inside a project? We can have epics, we can have stories, we can have tasks, we can have subtasks. So this is what a project looks like. And this is a particular type of project in Jira. It's called a scrum project. We can likewise have a Kanban project. We can have some other kind of projects also. But today we're talking about scrum project, a backlog in a scrum project. So some things are here. And let me just quickly run through what you can see here. You can see 5 stories. You can see sprint 1. You can see backlog on top. So let's start from the top. You see the linking of projects. Let me point that arrow here. Projects. Within projects, I have a project called High Altitude E-commerce website. Within that, there is a board called HEW board. Now, what is HEW? Jira by default takes the first 3 letters or first few 2 or 3 letters of the word of the name of the project. So here it is HEW. It is taken straight away. That's the what we call as the ID of the project. It's a key of the project key. It's 3-letter mostly. You can create your own project key when you create the project. We're not into creating project today. Now, by default, you have a board. That is your sprint. The backlog is the one where you put in everything. So if I need to put anything, a new story, a new task, I'd put directly here. I can just click it. I can add my story as something, and I can just, so e-commerce admin, I need to modify, so for example, details of category. So this is what I can simply do, and then just finish off, and that creates. So that's how easy you can create. You can continue creating stories in your backlog. The story is, mentioned by a green color. It's like that's the icon of the story. That's how you have the stories. Epics are not shown in the backlog. Epics are not shown here. You can create sprints. So there is a feature of creating sprints. So now I'm going to jump back to my presentation. You can see some of these things. So what does Jira offer? You've seen some of the things in Jira instance, the cloud version. By the way, when I say cloud version, this Jira, I'll just go back. This is the instance I use. It's called demojira.atlassian.net. It's just an example. You can go to Atlassian.net. You can create your own cloud version. But definitely you need to know how to utilize Jira. So it offers you all that. So you can have a server version, which you can download and install on your desktop, on your server, or you can have a cloud version. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. So we are on the cloud version. Now, and then the features are mostly the same. Only difference would be that Jira Cloud would be more updated than Jira Server. Okay, what in terms of backlog management activity does Jira offer? Does it allow you to update, add, modify, update epic? Yes. Stories? Yes. Same thing. Assign stories to team members. Obviously, you will have team members when you create a project. Can you assign stories? Yes, you can assign stories, and that you would need to do as a product owner, as a scrum master, as a tech lead, depending on the organization, the role, who would assign. You decide from your organization perspective. It is not the product owner who would assign the stories to team members. It is a team which will get together and they will assign stories to themselves. That's how it happens. Now, can be done? Yes, it can be done. Can the stories be assigned to sprint? Yes, it can be easily. And stories, where do they come from? Backlog. Can the stories be groomed? Story grooming is an offline activity. It happens when a product owner organizes that backlog grooming exercise and calls on all the team members. Now, the backlog grooming as an activity is offline, but while the grooming is going on, the product owner can actually open the story in Jira and update all the details instead of noting down details in a notepad or a Word file, can actually open that. So you can do backlog grooming on Jira itself. Don't need to do it in separate Excel or a Word or any other document, and updating Jira later. That's what I would recommend. That's one of the tips also. Can these stories and epics be estimated? Yes. The estimation happens in two ways, and I can probably write down here as a, so it can happen in story points, and it can happen in days and hours. Excuse me, or days, hours. That's possible. And let me put up parentheses around that so that, and we're going to see that. All right. So it's possible to estimate your stories. Yes. It is possible to search, list, filter out some of the stories, some of the tasks, some of the epics, excluding the others. You can do that. There is a way to do that. It's called Jira Query Language, JQL. That is available in Jira. You go to issues and filters, and I'll take you there. We'll create one filter just to see, if possible, if we have the time. It is possible to do that. Yes, it's possible to do that. And these are some of the operations that you need to do. You need to have in a tool which can help you see items, your stories, your tasks in Jira right away. Can you create subtasks and tasks and associate them to stories? You can. Can you log your work? You should log your work. If you need a burn down chart, if you want a proper burn down chart, if you want a burn up chart, you should log time. And it's not difficult to log your time into Jira. You can just open the task and you can go to the old view. You can click on log time, and you can actually do that. I'll probably just show you that. Having logged that time, can you see your burn down chart in Jira? Yes, you can see a burn down chart. If your team members, and you should and you will, you log your time to each and every story that you work on a daily basis, you will have a very good burn down chart. Can the stories be linked to epics? Yes, it happens. Can the stories be linked to stories? Yes. Can the tasks be linked to stories? Yes. Can subtasks be linked to, and that for that matter, I can take you straight away to this mapping that I have here. A parent-child relationship, for example. Epic cannot be linked to another epic. All epics are independent. Now, that would be a question, because sometimes I feel that this epic is dependent on that epic. Normally, what would I do? I will divide or split an epic into multiple stories in Jira, and then create the mapping between epic stories and epic, or stories and stories. So that's a very brief kind of mapping. So for example, a story cannot be a parent of an epic, but a story can be a parent of a subtask. An epic can be a parent of a story. Is that right? So epic can be a parent of a story, yes. And an epic can be a parent of a task. Epic can be a parent of a subtask. No, subtasks are specific to stories. That's an interesting thing. So you'll also find that the epic to epic, story to story, task to task, and subtask to subtask parent-child relationship is normally not there. All right, we'll come back here. And what else can be done? Can, if a story is created, can more than one people watch that story? If any update happens on the story and you get an update in your backlog, it's possible. Yes. Can you update the story? Yes. Can you assign story to somebody else? If you are assigned that story, you can assign to somebody else. And can you comment on a story? You can always. In fact, instead of sending emails to each other, you can directly comment on a story. Can you change the default workflow? This is not a session where I can show you, but I can show you where it is possible to do that. You can go to project settings, you can go to the workflow, you can create a new workflow and change the default workflow. So some of these activities I can show you, keeping in mind that we have very limited time. And let's switch over to Jira now, and see what is possible. All right. So far, anybody has any question? I'm not sure if there's any question that you've typed. I'm sorry, I'm going back. I'm going the wrong direction. Yeah, there is your.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. I'm sorry. Before you start the question, I have only 2-3 minutes before I switch over to the next part. So I may not be able to take all questions, but let's take on priority. So first question, yes, please.
Hello, this is Satya.
Hi, Satya.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, previously we were using the Jira. Okay, now we have migrated to Azure.
All
Okay,
right.
so
Okay.
what were the epics, stories, and all both same to the Azure and Jira, or it will be same?
So the concept of epics and concept of stories remain the same irrespective of the tool you use. Now, if you've switched over to Azure, uh, the concept of epic would remain the same. Epics in terms of agile and in terms of scrum as a model, they span multiple releases. So if you're using Azure, they would also mean the same, that in Azure you would have epics which span multiple releases.
Okay, and there is a Kanban board, right, for bugs, sprints, right? So that will be same to Azure, or it will be different? Because
So
I'm very new in Azure, that's why I'm asking.
okay, because this session is very specific to Jira, I may not be able to answer that question. But if you have
Okay.
something on Jira, I can answer that. If you're shifting from Azure to Jira, I can answer that.
Yeah, actually,
Right.
yeah, because I'm little bit confused. Maybe it will be same or no. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Or we can actually do another webinar on Azure.
Yeah,
I can take that as a feedback. I can pass it on, and I think we are listening at Stalwart, and we can do that. We can do that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
this
Thank
may
you.
not be the right forum to answer that question.
Correct, correct, correct. Yeah, thank you.
Any other question? Well, I can take one more before I move to the next. Okay, just let me know. I think
Bharat, there is a question in chat, Zoom
uh,
chat. So
okay,
could you kindly have a look at it and answer it to Pradeep Kumar?
sure. And I am just looking. How do I go to the chat? Okay, wonderful. So let me just go through. Does it come? Let's see. From Pradeep, is it? All right. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. Right. Click on. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay, there is a question on burnout chat. I'll take this question. I'll have 15-20 minutes of more session, and then I think I'd like to take your questions. So, okay, Pradeep Kumar, this is the question. This is the one that you have. Okay, let me read it out. Does Jira provide an option where as soon as we complete the task and story, the status of task should automatically get to completed, or manually we'll have to set this to complete? No, you have to manually set it to complete. That's not an option today, because why it happens so, um, there is a workflow behind each and every issue. There is a default workflow of start, in progress, done. Once you have completed all the tasks, it would show as green in for a story, but you have to manually take it, unless you set up uh, some kind of programming, some kind of scripting within Jira, that it automatically should do. It doesn't do. You have to take it to to completion yourself. So does that answer your question? Now, in the latest, in the most latest, I still need to see if that is possible, but normally it doesn't happen. The status does not automatically get completed. It does remind me of somewhere in some version of Jira. It used to happen. It was not in the cloud, but in server version. Uh, that the story task completion, but that whatever whenever the task completion used to happen, the story completion used to happen automatically. But I don't see it now, so it's not there now. So you have to manually set it to complete. Okay, and okay, that's Rohit answering probably. So you have to manually change the status is normally available on the top of the screen. Yes, that is right, and I'll show you that. And how do you represent tech debt items? So tech debt items I can take, I think, take the question quickly. Tech debt items are very uh, specific, because these are mostly your bugs coming out of production. They can be coming out of your um, mm, even your normal testing as well, acceptance testing, whichever testing you're doing. These are mentioned as bugs, so they do not follow the hierarchy of the backlog management. But it's a good question to ask why, even if they are bug, they have to go back to the backlog only. Means they need to be considered as part of the future sprint, either current or a future sprint, mostly in the future sprint. And they do not get estimated. So you always have to figure out a bucket of time, say about maybe if you are normally you're in terms of story points, if you take 30 story points, you can say 5 story points reserved for bugs, a very absurd way of saying, but that's how it works. That's a pragmatic way. And if in terms of days, you have 10 days, you can say 1 day or 2 days reserved for bugs, depending on how many bugs you have. And you will always like to clear your backlog of bugs. But one thing is for sure that I recommend, and I always recommend to all teams, that please, bugs coming out of production, which are high and critical in nature, as well as coming out of your previous sprint or current sprint, should be taken on priority and should also be part of your backlog. Yeah, that's all. In case, okay, just the next question, in case of, and I'll, just as the last one I'll take before I move to the next part on demo. If it is a code improvement, it's a technical item. If it is a technical item, it goes as a story. It is not a functional story. It is mostly as a technical story. Is that your question? If something like a code improvement on existing completed feature, yes, it becomes a technical story. There is no concept in Jira of marking a story as a technical story or a functional story. A story is a story. What you can do in the beginning, you can write technical story, double colon, and I can show you that as well. So you can just, while creating a story, and I can just switch this, close this, and I'll say, okay, for example, you create a story, and you can say, this is a technical story. So by default, it shows I can say story and say technical story. So say, or you can say improvement. Now, long back, in some version of Jira, they used to have improvement also as one of the, and new feature is also one of the issue type, but now it is not there anymore. So you can just mark it so that anybody who reads it will know, or you can use something called a label. Label is technical, but this is very absurd again. You'll have to just search through all the labels. That's possible. So either way, it's possible. But that's not offered by Jira today. You'll have to mark it in from your own way, I mean, from your own side. That's possible. Technical story, bug, everything is part of the backlog. It has to be considered as backlog. Okay, the rest of the questions, you can keep typing, you can keep asking. I'll reserve last 10 to 15 minutes for the questions. You're most welcome to ask. I'll be happy to answer. Let's shift to Jira instance. I will not be telling you what how it can be done, but I can show you what all is there in Jira in terms of backlog. So if this is the first time you're seeing Jira, can I have the background noise? There is some sound coming. I request you to, hi, can you, my request, who is not on mute, please keep yourself on mute. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, let's go. So this is your, so very quickly in terms of Scrum project, this is, don't get overwhelmed by all the features. If you're seeing it for the first time, if you're using Jira, you already probably know it, how the whole interface looks like. Jira offers you, in terms of backlog, this is a backlog. Yes, obviously you can create your sprint. So for example, I can quickly create a new sprint and I can go on creating new sprints. Now I can also change the nomenclature of the sprints. That means how the sprint name looks like. And I can plan the sprint. Now, planning the sprint today in cloud version, it's not possible. It's not also part of the webinar. But the moment you try to do it, it will take you to Confluence. So that's why I'm not going to do it. But in terms of editing sprint or deleting, you can do that, but only if you're an administrator. If you are a normal team member, you are a user, you cannot delete a sprint. If you are a user, you cannot even create a sprint. You have to have the proper access for that. So not everybody can create a sprint. Not everybody can manage a sprint. Not everybody can customize a sprint or edit a sprint. Somebody who has the access. Now, access we are not going into today. We are constraining ourselves only to the backlog management part. So as an administrator, for example, I can go on creating a new sprint again. I can create a new sprint. So create a new sprint and I have another sprint here. So I have sprint 1, 2, 3, I can go on do that. Now what I need to do is, once I have any story in that sprint. So for example, backlog has 3 items, sprint 1 has 3 items. You can see that this is an epic, which is mapped to the story, or vice versa. The story is mapped to this epic. This story is mapped to this epic, but this particular story is not mapped to any epic. We can do that. I can show you. All you need to do is just click here and go to the, open the story. So this is also to show you that how to go to the concern, a specific story from the backlog view. And you can go there. You can see some of the users. I can see there are a bunch of users I have got here. I've also given them some roles. For example, Greg for me is an architect. For example, Ash is a developer for me. Joy is a tester. And that's how I manage this. Manmeet, I've not assigned any role so far. Chris is, for example, a tech lead for me. There's Chris, there's Chris, and Manu is a developer. So this is how I work on this project. How I create, and these are all dummy users, by the way. I'm not using any team. I'm not showing any organizations board. It's all dummy. So yeah, that's what. And what else can we? What else? So you can actually. So we were on. So these are the users. I'm sorry, I'm not assigning anything to anything. How I do that? So I go on this. Follow me. It is a little fast, but this is how I can go to Epic link and do that. Excellent. No saving, nothing required. Go back to backlog and you will see. This is a very simple example of how things are so simple and so easily maintainable in that particular uh, uh, in the backlog view. Backlog view gives you complete backlog view, which sprint you are on. If you want to go on your current board, what you call as a team board, you can just go to the sprint, the active sprint, and you can see that. At one particular time, Jira offers you only one active sprint. And that's very clear actually. And you can also edit. You can go to the board settings. You can change what you want on the board or what you don't want on the board. It offers you a lot of features. You can change the color. You can create a quick filter. You can just change what it shows. So for example, now we come to what is called the filter query. This is where I was talking about the JQL. Now the JQL offered by Jira is very simple. It goes similar to your SQL, and it is not that as difficult. But once you go through the training provided by us, you can actually see how various ways you can use functions, you can use keywords uh, to go to just filter out what you, because today it might be having only 5 10 or maybe 12 13 issues. As you use Jira, and if you have used Jira, it just gets out of hand. You have thousands of issues after a few months or maybe a few weeks, depending on your usage. Maybe after a few months, for example. And if you want to see a particular issue, it becomes very difficult. Filters come in handy. Now, filters are basically two types: basic and advanced. Basic, you can just select the column and say which you want, where you want. You can say, for example, this particular column name, blah blah blah, story or epic, blah blah blah. What you want, you can just select out and in. But if you want to go to JQL, you can type it all. For example, I can say I want only story. Actually, it shows only story, and as a search, it will show you only story. So the epics are gone. So all those purple icons are gone now. So that's just for example. So JQL, and you can actually save also. So you can save the name of this particular uh, whole query, and you can give it a name. So for example, I can save as. So you can save, and you can have multiple filters, and you can have your board show only those stories. You may not like to see all stories. So that's interesting here. I'll go back to the previous one. So I'm going back and back. So I'm going to my project. Interesting thing that I like to show you is Jira in terms of backlog. So let's say I'm just switching over, and follow me if you can, please. If when I want to create a new story, I'm creating a story. I'm putting all my stories follow the story template. I would recommend that you also do that. It becomes easy. And in the description, you write the acceptance criteria. Many times you feel that the current fields provided by Jira are not enough. So let's run through what are the fields. For example, project, issue type, summary, fixed version. We'll skip the version part for now. It's not there. Component also we'll skip for now. Description, yeah, you detail out the acceptance criteria, you detail out any other technical criteria if you have any of the non-functional requirements in description. Priority, by default Jira offers you high critical highest critical highest medium low and lowest and high. These are the various priorities. You want to change the priority, you have to go to Jira settings, introduce a new priority level. You can do that. Jira settings is on the left. So you can always change that. Jira offers you that facility also, that you can include a new priority level also. Right, showstopper. For example, you want to create. I see some of the teams, they have production issues coming and they want to mention something as a showstopper. Can you do that? Yes, you can include a new priority. So that's what the labels. Labels are just text labels, tags, kind of tags assigned to your stories. They help in filtering your stories and tasks and epics out of the rest of stories. If you want to attach a specification document to your story, you can go ahead and do that. Is a PDF, is a doc, is XLS, doesn't matter. Now, here is interesting because if you want to know dependencies between stories, so which story is blocked by which, so I can go on and on, which is blocked by so and so. What I was trying to tell you that some of the fields already exist, some of the fields might not be there. For example, story point is there, but if you feel maybe you want to write release, maybe you want to include any other new field, what you can do is either look for the field here, click on configure fields and see if the field exists. Maybe it's not checked, but if everything is checked but still your field is not here, I would recommend you go to your project settings. Now you can go to your project settings. So for example, here we are on our e-commerce website. You go to your project settings, you go to the custom field. So that's where you can go, but this requires your admin to operate. So you can go to your project settings, you can do that part. So it's possible to find a new field from the field section here. In fact, you see workflows. Jira offers you to create a new workflow. By default, the workflow, and I'm going back and forth. If you're finding that I'm doing too fast, I'm sorry, the time, but I'm just trying to show you what all is possible in Jira. It's a lot of things possible in Jira. And for example, I open a to-do story. I double click on it. It opens up, and I want to know what is the default workflow right now. Okay, I just go to the workflow. The workflow, as we understand, is how or through what status or states your story passes. By default, Jira offers you a software simplified workflow, and it goes same for any new project also. Any new Scrum project you create, it will follow that. And so you can have to do done, to do in progress and done. Now, it's a very interesting thing. Can you have your own workflow? Yes, you can have your own workflow. How can you do that? You need to create your own workflow, create your own workflow scheme, put that workflow scheme, assign that workflow scheme to this particular project. Obviously, that requires us to follow some 4, 5, 6, 7 steps, but we're not going to do that. But it's possible to have a much broader, much expanded workflow and have that workflow assigned to your project. So that's possible. You want to include a number of people, you want to have a new screen, you can do that through Jira. So the Jira is a lot of things possible. Components, the components used to be there in previous versions. What is a component? When you create your story, when you create your epic, you find certain times in terms of technicalities, you have within your software, within your project, you have some components. For example, it could be a hardware component. It could be a architecture kind of component. It could be some logistic or something component. You can categorize, you can group your stories according to those components. That's the purpose of a component. We use components very less nowadays. Releases, Jira offers you where a facility where you can organize your all stories into various releases and say these stories will go into this release. Interestingly, Jira is configured in such a way that your concept of sprint and releases can move independent of each other. You can have a release in the middle of a sprint also. So I can just create and why it says releases here and it says start versioning. The reason is because the way Jira has evolved over a period of time, it used to be called as versions. In previous versions of Jira, Jira 4, Jira 3, 5, 6, it used to be called as versions. Even the current version of Jira 8.5.1, if I'm not wrong, the concept is defined as releases. Internally, still they follow what is called version. And you can say, what, from start date this to this date, this is version 1. So you can say release, probably release 1.1. And then you can say which date it starts and which date it ends, and you save it. And then you can mark your stories to that release. That helps. But mind it please, Jira does not tell you that the release is coming or going. It just gives you indicator. So Jira is not an intelligent tool that way. It will not give you alerts unless you program it that way. And for now, this is very, very little programming possible with Jira, and that is through workflows, that is through triggers, and actions and post actions, that it is possible. Jira doesn't offer you a lot of facility in terms of automation that way. So we can talk about automation in a separate discussion, separate webinar. It's an interesting topic. Likewise, workflows is an interesting topic to follow. But for now, what I'll do, I'll pause. I'll take you back to the slide, give you a little bit of tips on what you need to do when you are talking about your backlog. I always suggest that you have one person manage the product backlog, that is a product owner. Does that mean that you cannot create a story? You are a developer, you are a tester, you are a tech lead, you are an architect, but you can't create a story? No, please go ahead. You can create a story. And I'm sorry, the mark come from my side. So yeah, you can create your own story, right? You can, but whenever you create a story, please assign it to the product owner. I always recommend do not assign your stories to Scrum Master. If your Scrum Master is just a Scrum Master, if it is a developer tester, you can still do that. But because Scrum Master is not supposed to own a story, is not owner for the delivery also. Keep your stories as small as possible. Follow invest principle. Backlog is always emergent. Keep it that way. Keep bringing new items to the backlog. You never can say that backlog is over. It's finished. You always have new items coming to the backlog. While creating stories, prefer always when you are creating the story, that time only create the acceptance criteria. Don't wait that today I'll create the description, the title, the summary. Tomorrow I'll enter the acceptance criteria. That doesn't happen. So that's my observation, my feeling, and I've seen in my experience. Please mention the acceptance criteria, then I'm there. Always focus in the story. Always focus when you're creating a story, what the story is, why it is required. Don't start putting details of how you're going to implement it. That should come through your tasks. And as I showed to you, if you feel that a certain field should capture certain detail, look into the project settings if that field exists. If that field does not exist, then only create a new field. Otherwise, most of the cases you'll find a field where you can include in your screen and start capturing data in that field. Yeah, you can change your workflow anytime, but I always suggest that when you're creating your project, that time you create your workflow, your new workflow. Do study what should be the right workflow for your project and then start the project. Don't do vice versa. Those are my tips. And a lot of other things that can be done, but I like to go to your questions. So let me see. So I'm switching over to questions now. I'm through with my set of slide and a look through of Jira. Yes. I see there are a good number of questions coming in. I can answer these. So what you can do instead of speaking to me or asking the question, type in a question. Let me see how many I can cover. I have 10 minutes left, and before we conclude the session, let me see how many. So where we will. All right, I think we were here. Did I skip any? Can you just go to the beginning and see if I skipped any question? Okay. All right. Mhm. Okay. Okay. I think we're done. All right. Yeah. So let's start with this part. Yes. So labels. So I think some of these things I've already mentioned. Um, let me attend to these questions one by one. Labels are mostly used as tags. They have little or no meaning to any story, epic, or a task or a subtask. But why do we use labels? Only for the purpose of filtering out your story. Some people, they do not have the facility. For example, your teams may not have, or your administrator may not create a release, but internally you follow your own release for your team. So what you can do is you can use label. So you can use label release 1, label release 2, label release 3. That is possible. Although I would always suggest go and ask your admin, your project admin, your system admin, Jira admin to create the version, to create the release for you. That is one way label can be used. Labels are also used if you are categorizing your stories into various themes. So labels can be used because there is no requirement hierarchy called theme. So you can also use label to separate out your stories according to your customers. So these stories go for these customers, these stories. So how would you use labels when you write the JQL? When you write the JQL, you write project equal to so-and-so and label equal to so-and-so. And then you'll get all those stories where, or all those items, product backlog items, which have that label. So that's the purpose of a label. So labels are just like that. A component, as I already shared, what is a component? Somebody was not able to hear. I hope you're able to hear what I'm talking about now. Just go last and say, okay, I think yes, you're able to hear. Does backlog view offer some option to view sprint progress in terms of a percentage value? That is something that it does not offer you. The only way to see your sprint is progressing is best ways to see your burn down chart. Excellent. Let's go to the burn down chart. Let's see if the burn down chart. So you go to reports, and I'll just close this for now and come back. You have multiple reports available in Jira. And that's why I would say almost 20, 22 reports are there. And they have been categorized as agile reports. And I'm talking about Jira project for Scrum. So let me be specific there. Jira project for Scrum offers you almost 20 plus reports. They are burn down, burn up, sprint report, velocity. I can open up, let's say, for example, burn down chart. It gives you a good indicator of the progress. So for example, today it could give you just these products. So how many story points of work is organized? This is a 1 week sprint, that what is in front of you, HEW sprint 1. So it shows you from November 21 to November 27. That's the timeline you'll see at the bottom. And in terms of story points, in terms of, if you want to point in terms of original time estimate, it'll give you what was the original time estimate and how it has been reducing over the period of days. Now, this sprint is created today. So this was created yesterday. So, and the items were created today. So it will show you 48 hours as per day. But it requires you to have hour and day estimate for each and every story. How do you do that? Go to any story, for example, and open it and mention. I think you must have seen it. You can do that while creating a story. When a story is already there, for example, my one of my stories, HEW13, I have the original estimate here. So I can write original estimate. Now M stands for minute, H stands for hours, and W stands for week, and D stands for days. You can see that hint given to you. So for example, if I want to estimate this story as 4 days, I just write 4D and I click on the tick and it takes it. Awesome. So it takes it there. So this estimate is already given. Now, what else I would like to see? Maybe story points. Now, story points definitely are not given by one person. Story point estimation is done by the team. I would always request that. So as a team, maybe you have estimated 5 and click on this and it goes. So now you can go to the backlog and see that this particular story has got that particular estimate. So you go to the backlog and come to that story. This was a story, and this story has got a story point 5. So interestingly, on your backlog, whatever represents on the right, this point is story point. So this particular story I can see does not have a story point. So you can click on it, edit it, and assign a story point. Please assign story points as teams. All right. We're at reports. I'm going back to reports, and we have 4 minutes left. I'd like to see how much possible we can cover. And burn up chart is just the other way of the other side of seeing how many things are getting completed, how many stories are getting completed on a daily basis. That's we can actually have another session on projects reports as well, completely. So you have sprint report, you have velocity chart. I think whatever you require for your teams to function, you have those kind of charts and reports already available in Jira. If you find something is not there, you can always go back to your project. You can go back to your Jira. You can create your dashboard here. Then you can create your own gadgets. You can create your own reports and publish and start putting those reports here on the dashboard. You can have a team dashboard. You can have a person-wise dashboard, and you can dashboards become very, very useful when you are talking as a team. You are projecting your work to your management. So that's what the function of it. So I'll go back to the questions. That's how you can do. And all right, so yeah, that's attended to this question. Oh, okay. So you already have an answer here. There's something called reports. Awesome. Yes. good number of good number of reports are available. If you don't think that there are enough reports, there are plugins on the internet, marketplace.atlassian.com, that you will find a lot of other reports as well. Epics and components are not same. Components are technical in nature. For example, I was working with a project where we had um, something as a particular app being developed. It's a very small example. So, for example, there was a requirement of an app being developed, but there were three teams, and the project was same. There were almost about 12 people in that team. The project for them in Jira was same, but they wanted to differentiate their stories. So instead of using labels, what they did, they said each of the teams would have different component. One was iOS team, one was the Android team, one was the web team. So they had different components to list out their different stories. So that's to say that all iOS app would be based on, so they have different, so they decided that they want to use components to differentiate their stories that way. Some people, what they like to do is, they within their project they have, for example, there's a telecommunication team that I work with. They had different components: the network component, the software component, the application layer component. Same code, but they have different components with respect to stories and epics and features. So they had those components. So application layer, the system layer, the hardware layer. They had each of these stories organized as different components. So their components were application, network, hardware, system, platform. These were different components. So this is how you differentiate between. So this is what the components would mean. Epics are your requirements, large requirements. As a admin, I want this so that this can be done. It is requiring for a solution. It requires some output to be coming. To accomplish all that within your epics and features and stories, you can have components. That's what they're totally different. A structure is a feature of Jira. It's actually a plugin that allows you, and on this question by Prema, what is a structure? A structure is a plugin. Uh, it's available on Marketplace. It allows you to see all issues in a very hierarchical way. I'm just looking at the time. I just about have 1 minute left to end the session. So quickly, I like to go. So it's a very good plugin. You can use it uh, and have a very organized way of, or organized display of your epics and stories and subtasks. Beautiful way of doing it. That's a plugin. Okay. Can we see the accepted stories later? Accepted stories later. I couldn't get that. So that's from NARNH. Um,
Hi. That stories with that are accepted by the product owner. Can we see that stories later on after some time? Suppose some stories are closed and that is accepted by a product owner.
all right. Yes. There are two ways to do this. One, you can create a filter to see, which would filter out all the completed stories. That is one way. And so you can create your own filter, save it, and you can create, and once you save that filter, the report of that you can use issue analysis report and put that in your dashboard. And so you can always see in your dashboard what are the completed stories. The other way to do that is to change your workflow and have one state called accepted. Like in this, you saw to do, in progress, done. Have a new workflow in which one of the states is called accepted. Then whichever story moves to accepted state, you can filter again out and see all those stories. So there are multiple ways of doing that in Jira. So that's the flexibility that Jira offers to you. Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
I'm sorry, there are questions coming in the background. I can hear something.
How to prioritize your product backlog?
Yes. So priority best, the way Jira offers you to prioritize your backlog is by using words called highest, high, critical, medium, low. Now, does that solve your problem? Yes, wonderful. But if it does not, there is a field called priority in Jira that you can go to, and you can take that and create a priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for each and every story, for each and every epic. Now you are going to, as a team, work on stories only. So have your stories prioritized like that. In case you don't like that or you don't want to use that field, you can create a new custom field in Jira. It is possible, and include in your project, include in the issue screen. So every time a new story is created, that field would come, and you can populate that field. You can enter the priority number. That is possible in Jira, but you have to take a little turn to bring that field into your issue scheme. By default, highest, high, critical, medium, low. These are the priority numbers or the priority text. But I understand what you're saying, because
Mm.
in Agile, we follow what is called the UPN, the unique
UPN.
priority number. Yes. So a Scrum project, Agile, even the Kanban, they like to have unique priority numbers. Create a new custom field called UPN. And how to do that? Maybe we can cover that in some other discussion. But it's possible. It's possible. That's what we do in the training. Definitely take through all the schemes of how to issue type scheme. We include that, and because of less time, I can't show you that. But it's possible.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. What about reports that are related to the backlog? Can we get the PPT file? Okay, that PPT file I'll share definitely. I think that I leave to our team here at Stalwart, and let's see how it can be done. I think the webinar itself will be available. I think Chanda, you or somebody can help here how this is possible. Reports tree. Okay, I'm going to the next question by Sesa 543 and all. Can you explain the reports tree? I did not get the reports tree. There are a lot of reports in there, and there are almost 22 reports. So explaining all of them would be a little bit of time. We can do another session. We can do, but I don't know when we and how we can do that. But it's possible. I can take you through all the reports. But I would suggest that, why not join us in one of the discussions when we do this. But yeah, when we do our training discussions, all we take you through each and every report. All this backlog will be already populated, and you will have access to all the reports. And all. It's possible. I will encourage you to join us on that. Using labels, we distinguish between Scrum teams. Yes, you can do that. Oh, but in that case, what I'm assuming that all your Scrum teams are using one project. So that is from Moshe Simana. So yeah, if you want to do that, but I would not encourage that. Each team can have its own backlog. Each team can have its own project. Unless it is only, so your Scrum teams, I would recommend that. Each team can have its own. The way it is done is that each product, each service has its own backlog, has its own project in Jira. So that's way. But if you want to do that, use label for distinguishing between Scrum teams. You can do that. Why not? Not able to see the screen. I'm sure now you're able to. How product backlog prioritization? I answered that question. If there's a story, I think is the last question, and we've crossed our time by 5 minutes. So I think we started at 3:35. So Chanda, with your permission, I can take this question. If there is a story in a sprint which, after some investigation, is waiting for feedback from architect, product owner, then how can we represent it so that it gets resolved, so that tasks can be worked on? So I'll read the question again. If there's a story in a sprint which, after some investigation, is waiting. Okay, this is a story. A good point. In your backlog, you have to do in progress. In your workflow, you have to do in progress done. That's why I always say, whenever you start your project, obviously when I say always say, I tell my teams, but here is the first time talking to you. So I would recommend that when you start with your project, always use your experience. Can there be a situation where this thing is there? Yes. Would you like to have a state called blocked in your workflow? Yes or no. If you want to have a state called blocked, awesome. But then it should not be exploited. Just because something is waiting from a product owner or a architect or a tech lead or a tester or anybody, it should not, or a customer even, it should not be put into block, because block means really blocked. You're not able to move. It's just a blocker there. You're held up. So you can have that way. You can have a workflow where you have blocked as one of the states. The other way to do is configure your board to include one column which says blocked, but it is not part of your state. It is just a column called blocked, and move that item into that so that it is highlighted. But again, Jira offers you this much. To clear that block, your Scrum Master comes in handy. Your Scrum Master is the person who should be clearing it out. But yeah, you can use Jira to mark it. The best way to mark it is through a workflow. Because why I say a workflow, the longer it stays in that status, you can always tell from the sprint report, you can tell from the reports that it stayed in there for that long time. It's possible. What we call as a cycle time. So, because ultimately you don't want it to stay there. You want it to be worked on. So highlight it. That is what I would recommend. So use your workflow very effectively. Yes, I'll be sharing the presentation, and I think how this is a question. Channa or somebody, can you please help us here? There's a question on the presentation part. I think we can do that. We'll get back to you. Presentation is can be made available. Yes. Okay. I think I'm through. There's one question I can see. I think we can create another Jira sign to product owner and link it to Jira as blocked by the new Jira, which will be resolved by the product owner. Let me see if I can understand that. I think we can create another Jira. So that means another story and assign it to a product owner and link to the Jira as blocked by. Okay, well, you can do that. Yeah. I don't know how it is going to be that much of a help. You can do that. Creating a new item, unless it is accomplished as completed or done. So in this case, when it is done, yeah, best is to remain. I can recommend that please have the same story there. Let it be there, and do not create any other new story or a task. Because whatever is blocked should be highlighted, not a dependent item or another new item. That is like sugar coating, according to me. But I respect it when if you're saying that this is the way you're using it today. So it may not be the best practice, very frankly. But if it works for you, it works. No problem at all. What I would do is, if it is my team, I'll simply go and edit the workflow, and I'll have a status called blocked, and if something is blocked, I'll put it there. But I will mark it also. I'll put a comment in there that it is blocked because of this reason. I'll just not block it just like that. So, for example, I'll open a story here. I can just go and say, oh, I'm not. Yeah. I think we're crossing our time, almost 10 minutes. But use comments heavily, because those will really help you. For example, I'm just here. So I'll open this and I use comments for this. I hope you're able to see the screen. I'm still sharing it. So for example, Greg can add a comment. I can say, yes, Roy, or product owner Sharad, right? So at Sharad, I can simply, and I can say, this is, oops, I'm sorry, is waiting for your clarification. But the moment I say save, I get an email, because it's been marked to me. And it is also recorded that on this particular day, this particular time, this comment was created here, and I get an email. Now, whosoever is watching it will also get this. So people can go on adding their name here. I'm watching this issue. I'm watching this issue. And by default, the one who it is assigned to will also get a notification that some changes happen. Best is to use the comments. That's what I would say. Okay. I think we're through with the questions and all. There are a couple of items on the presentation and everything. It's possible. How it is possible, we'll see. But I really thank you for joining in and taking time out for this discussion today. Nice talking to you guys. Nice asking questions. We'll be coming with more such content. Wishing you a very nice evening ahead. Right? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahad.
Thank you. And you're welcome.
Thank you, Sharad.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Sharad.
Welcome again. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing.